The entire restaurant went silent the moment the shy waitress dropped her tray and signed 3 simple words to the billionaires. Deaf mother, words that no one else understood, but that made the old woman begin to cry instantly. And what happened? Next forced the most powerful man in the city to fall to his knees in front of everyone. Isabella Hart had always been invisible, the kind of girl people forgot. Seconds after looking at her, she moved quietly between tables at Aurora Grand Restaurant in downtown Chicago, carrying plates, balancing glasses, whispering polite apologies whenever someone brushed past her, as if she were part of the furniture. Her uniform slightly faded, her hair always tied back in a simple bun, her eyes lowered, not from weakness but from habit. Life had trained her to take up as little space as possible. She had grown up in a small apartment above a laundromat, with a mother who lost her hearing at 25 after a severe infection and a father who left because he could not accept the silence. Isabella had learned sign language before she properly learned to write it, became her first language. Her safe place, her bridge to the only parent who never abandoned her, but after her mother passed away. 2 years ago, Isabella stopped signing. She packed away that part of herself because every gesture reminded her of loss, so she worked quietly, saving money, studying at night, dreaming of becoming a speech therapist one day, hoping to help children like her mother who were trapped in a world that refused to slow down enough to understand them that night. However, everything changed because the man who walked into the restaurant was not ordinary. His name was Alexander Rowe, a billionaire tech magnate known for buying failing companies and turning them into empires. His presence alone made the manager nervous and the staff hyper-alert, but it was not Alexander who drew Isabella's attention. It was the elderly woman walking slowly beside him, her silver hair neatly brushed, her posture elegant yet fragile, her eyes scanning the room not with arrogance but with confusion. Isabella noticed immediately the small hearing aids resting behind the woman's ears and the way Alexander leaned close to speak exaggeratedly, as if hoping volume could replace understanding. Most guests stared because everyone recognized Alexander Rowe from magazines, but no one noticed the quiet discomfort on his mother's face, except Isabella. She felt something twist in her chest, a memory, a reflex, an old language knocking at the door of her heart. She tried to ignore it. She had trained herself not to feel too deeply while working, but when she approached their table and saw the older woman struggling to follow the waiter's rapid explanation of the specials, Isabella made a decision that would change her life forever. Instead of speaking, she gently placed the menus down, stepped slightly into the woman's line of sight, and with trembling hands began to sign, "Welcome, we are happy you are here." The elderly woman froze, her cloudy eyes widened, and for a second time itself seemed to pause. Then slowly, as if afraid the moment might disappear, she signed back, "You know this language?" Isabella's throat tightened. She had not signed to a stranger since her mother's funeral, yet the movements returned like breathing. "Yes," she signed softly, "my mother was deaf." The old woman's lips trembled and tears filled her eyes. Alexander noticed immediately. He had been checking his phone, barely paying attention until he saw his mother's shoulders shake. He looked up, startled, expecting bad service or some offense, but instead, he saw his mother smiling through tears while the waitress stood before her, hands moving gracefully in silent conversation. "What are you doing?" he demanded sharply. Isabella stepped back, slightly intimidated, but the older woman reached for her son's sleeve and signed quickly. Alexander frowned, confused. He understood only fragments because he had never taken the time to fully learn his mother's language. He relied on interpreters' assistance, written notes, convenience over connection. "What is she saying?" he asked. His mother looked at him with a mixture of sadness and pride, then wrote 3 words on a napkin. "She understands me." Something inside Alexander cracked in. That instant, he realized that for years, he'd given his mother everything except the one thing she needed most, someone who could truly speak to her world. And now a shy waitress earning minimum wage had done in seconds what he had failed to do in decades. Isabella tried to excuse herself, embarrassed by the attention, but the elderly woman held her hand firmly and signed, "Please stay with us." So Isabella remained, and throughout the dinner she translated jokes, explained dishes, shared stories of her own mother, and for the first time in years, Alexander watched his mother laugh. Freely, not politely, not faintly, but fully the soundless. Laughter that shook her shoulders and brightened her entire face. The restaurant staff whispered, customers filmed, quietly sensing something emotional unfolding. Yet none of them knew that this silent conversation was rewriting the heart of a billionaire. By the time dessert arrived, Alexander's eyes were red. He cleared his throat and asked, Isabella, how long have you worked here? 2 years, she replied softly. And do they know you can do this, he asked. She shook her head. No, sir, it never seemed important. Alexander looked at his mother, who was watching Isabella as if she had found a lost daughter. Then he made a decision that would shock everyone in the room. But before he could speak, the restaurant manager stormed over, furious about the delay in service, unaware that history was being made at table 12. And what he said next would push the night into a storm none of them were prepared for. The manager's voice sliced through the fragile warmth of the moment as he accused Isabella of neglecting her duties, embarrassing the restaurant and delaying a high-profile guest, his face red with frustration, unaware that the very guest he was trying to impress was watching him with a dangerous stillness. Alexander rose, stood up slowly, the kind of slow that makes a room nervous. Conversations faded, forks stopped, mid-air, cameras lowered. The manager continued rambling about professionalism and standards, threatening to write Isabella up, perhaps even terminate her employment for inappropriate behavior. Isabella felt the old familiar shame crawl up her spine, the instinct to apologize, to shrink, to disappear. She opened her mouth to say, sorry, but before a word could leave her lips, Alexander's mother rose from her chair. Something she had not done unassisted in years. She turned to the manager and began signing with firm, deliberate movements. Isabella translated through trembling breath. She says, you should be grateful. The manager laughed awkwardly, not understanding. Isabella continued, she says this young woman gave her the first peaceful dinner she has had in a public place in 15 years. She says you almost ruined it. The room grew heavier. Alexander stepped closer, his voice calm but carrying a weight that pressed against every wall. Do you know who? I am the manager, stuttered. Of course, Mr. Rowe, we are honored to have you here. Alexander nodded. Then you should also know that I was considering purchasing this restaurant chain tonight. He paused, letting the words sink in. I like to observe service quietly before making investments, and what I have observed is that your most valuable employee is the one you were about to humiliate. The manager's face drained of color. Isabella stared at the floor, unable to process what was happening. Alexander turned to her, his expression no longer intimidating but deeply human. My mother built my first company with me, he said softly. When investors refused to back a young, arrogant dreamer, she mortgaged her house. She believed in me when no one else did yet. I never learned her language because I was too busy chasing success. He looked at his mother then. Back at Isabella tonight, you gave me something money never could. You reminded me what connection actually means. The entire restaurant was silent, some guests openly crying. Alexander's mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. She signed something to Isabella, who translated with shaking hands. She says this was meant for my future daughter-in-law, but tonight she wants you to have it. Isabella gasped, stepping back. I cannot accept this. Alexander interrupted gently. You can and you will, but not as charity. He pulled a card from his wallet and placed it on the table. I want to offer you a position at my foundation. We fund accessibility technology schools for the deaf interpreter programs. We need someone who understands not just the language, but the heart behind it. Isabella's mind raced. She had spent years feeling small, unseen, replaceable, and now the most powerful man in the room was offering her purpose, not pity. The manager attempted to interject, apologizing profusely, but Alexander raised a hand, effective immediately. He said coldly, you are relieved of your position. I will finalize the acquisition tomorrow and restructure leadership completely. The staff exchanged stunned glances. Justice had arrived without warning. Isabella felt tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming shift of destiny. Alexander's mother embraced her tightly, whispering in soft, broken speech, "Thank you, Isabella." Signed back, "No thank you," but the night was not finished. As Alexander prepared to leave, he turned to the crowd and said, "Learn the language of the people you love before someone else does." The words echoed long after he exited the restaurant. Within weeks, Isabella's life transformed. She began working at the Roe Foundation, helping launch nationwide campaigns for inclusive communication. She spoke at conferences, sharing her story, inspiring corporations to train staff in sign language. Her once quiet presence became a powerful voice for millions, yet she never lost her humility. She often visited small cafes, sitting with deaf patrons, signing freely, honoring her mother's memory. Months later, at a press event unveiling a new accessibility initiative, Alexander surprised everyone again. He stepped onto the stage beside Isabella and began signing, awkward but determined. "I am still learning." The audience erupted in applause. Isabella laughed softly, correcting his hand position as his mother watched proudly from the front row. The billionaire who once measured success in numbers now measured it in moments, and the shy waitress who once tried to be invisible became the bridge that healed a family, restored a son's conscience, and reshaped an empire. And as cameras flashed and headlines spread across the nation, one truth remained undeniable: sometimes the quietest hands create the loudest change. And on that unforgettable night in a restaurant filled with strangers, silent language rewrote the destiny of them all, leaving everyone who witnessed it forever transformed.